Hi everyone, welcome back. I do hope that you've watched my previous review and initial impression of the Nothing Phone 1. Now the 128GB storage edition goes at a very affordable price point of 1499 ringgit, and apparently you can actually even buy one at a price point of USD 299. So it is really packing some serious hardware in a very affordable price point. With that said, I'm going to make a comparison with the Nokia G60 5G. With me is the 6GB edition, 128GB storage of the Nokia G60 5G, which is slightly cheaper than the Nothing Phone 1. Now, on paper, the Nothing Phone 1 seems to be ahead of the Nokia G60 5G in almost every aspect, but we do know that specification is just part of the story. So in today's review, I'm going to share a comparison between both these devices and let's see how it turns out to be. So this is the Nokia G60 5G and this is the Nothing Phone 1. Now what I have with me here is the 128GB storage edition of both these devices. So the memory on the G60 is expandable, whereas that on the Nothing Phone 1 is not expandable. G60 is slightly cheaper than the Nothing Phone 1, and the more higher variant of the Nothing Phone 1 actually compares to the pricing of the Nokia X30 instead. With that said, at a price point of 1499, now the Nothing Phone 1 is more interesting than ever. Forget about the theatricality, the basic hardware itself is too good for this price point. Both these devices, as you can see here, they are black. They are going for two different approaches here. The G60 is an eco-friendly device, whereas the Nothing Phone 1 is full of this eye candy effect, as you can see. Now this also makes the device, I would say, compromises on the build quality. Now of course it has an aluminium frame along with a Gorilla Glass protected front and back. The G60 has a Gorilla Glass protected front, a plastic back and a plastic frame, but the G60 feels more sturdy, more compact thanks to its narrow build, and it's also slightly taller, having a better weight distribution. Like I said in my earlier review, the Nothing Phone 1 tends to be slightly hollow compared to devices like the Nokia G60 5G. So this is up to individual preference, but I would say that the G60 5G definitely has a better feel. This is also thanks to the slightly more chamfered edges that we have on the G60 compared to the sharp ones on the Nothing Phone 1. Now, do take note that both these devices have dual microphone. The G60 offers a 3.5mm head jack, which is not available on the Nothing Phone 1. On the front, this is where most of the magic is, on the display. But before we get into the display, I really need to share with you the performance of both the devices. So the Nothing Phone 1 has an in-display fingerprint scanner. Now this is one of the best in-display fingerprint scanner that I have come across in a very long time, especially coming from a Nokia device. You can see how fast, how responsive, how accurate the in-display fingerprint scanner is. Now compare that to the Nokia G60, it goes for a more traditional fingerprint scanner, but the fingerprint scanner is housed within the power button, and it is also as fast, as responsive, as accurate as you can be. Now I would say that the fingerprint scanner tends to be slightly more responsive in real life compared to the Nothing Phone 1, just a tad bit. So with that said, let's take a look into the hardware performance. Now do take note, at this price you're getting a Snapdragon 778 on the Nothing Phone 1 and a Snapdragon 695 in the G60. Both these devices are 5G devices, and if you go into the benchmarking capability, you'll see what is expected to be seen: a slightly better single and multiple score on the Nothing Phone 1 compared to the G60 here. Now if you go deeper into the analysis, you know that both these processors are based on a 6nm technology, but the Snapdragon 778 has one additional core. I would not say additional core, it's just one of the core is set up at a very high frequency of 2.52 and even has 3 cores at 2.4 GHz. So this is definitely higher than the clock speed in the G60, giving it a much better experience. But again, in real life, the experience that we have here is pretty much the same thanks to the well-optimized software and near Android stock experience on both these devices. So just to give you a feel on how they do, I'm just going to go back and go and launch some random article from Nokia Power User. So this is one written by me. Now one thing you can see here is that I've clicked that slightly faster. So one thing you can notice here is that the display on the Nothing is warmer, it's cooler on the G60. I'll get into this in a while. I'm just going to go into this. Let's launch them together. So you notice that how both these devices load the web page at about the same time, as you can see. Now do take note, both these devices supports a 120Hz refresh rate screen. Now let's go into Engadget. This tends to be really dense website. So I'm going to launch both of them together at the same time. There we go. You can see they launch at about the same speed. Scrolling is also smooth on both these devices. I'm going to just launch one article here and see how they perform in real life. Click into this. So you can see that they launched the page at the same time, so no complaints there in the general performance of both these processors, to be honest. So one last page to give you a rough idea how both the processors fare in real life usage. There we go. The actual performance of both this device in real life usage is about the same. Even the smoothness, the scroll speed, everything looks generally the same. Now one thing interesting that I want to bring your attention to is the Wi-Fi speed. So we're going to do the Wi-Fi test at the same time first, and then individually to show something unique here. So they are both connected to the same Wi-Fi, and this Wi-Fi speed is at 500 megabits per second. So I'm going to launch it at the same time now. So I've come across a very unique observation on both these devices. So you can see here that the Nothing Phone 1 is capable of pulling a higher bandwidth compared to the G60 at times. So this is my observation. When both these devices are connected to the same speed, you can see that in this instance they are about the same. So just let it run first before I run another test. So in this instance you can see a marginally better performance from the G60. So I'm just going to switch their places just to make it sort of fair. Now again, I'm going to do the same test. So you can see how the Nothing Phone 1 is capable of pulling more bandwidth, like I said earlier. So you can see if they're connected at the same time, the Nothing Phone 1 tends to pull more bandwidth compared to the G60 5G, especially more in the download area compared to the upload area. So this is a constant observation that I've noticed. But how true is this in real life performance? Now I'm just going to show you the individual speed of this network so that you understand that this is actually connected to a very fast Wi-Fi speed. So individually you can see how the G60 is pulling at about 200 megabits per second. I'm going to let it complete first before I show you the same individual test on the Nothing Phone 1. Now on the Nothing Phone 1 now, so you can see that this device is capable of pulling more bandwidth, having a better speed compared to the G60 by default. But how much of it actually translates to real life experience, I'm going to show you in a short while. There we go. Now one thing that I noticed is that when you go to YouTube playback, do take note that like I said, both these devices have brilliant display, but the display on the Nothing Phone 1 is definitely a class higher on paper. This is an OLED display capable of HDR10+, 120Hz refresh rate and showing up to 1 billion color. compared to the IPS display on the G60 with 120Hz refresh rate, no HDR support, no mention of any color whatsoever. But in my previous comparisons, the G60 display is very capable display, even able to rival pure display devices. I want to show you in a bit what I mean by this. So I'm going to go to a YouTube playback first. I'm going to just reduce the volume first so that we don't cross talk much. Now I'm going to show you what the Nothing Phone 1 can do. So the Nothing Phone 1 is capable of playing in 4K 60 frames per second high dynamic range. So I'm going to set that to that. On the G60 it is only limited to 1080p 60 frames per second, not capable of any HDR, but do take note that it does have sort of some HDR effect in the display by default. So I'm going to bring all the slider all to the beginning part of the video before I click them. So there we go. Let's pause this, go the back. Okay, I'm just going to click play, make the screen larger. Now this is what you're going to notice. So one observation is definitely a more warmer display on the Nothing Phone 1 compared to the G60 here. But you can see this. You can see despite it capable of pulling more bandwidth, supporting 4K HDR at 60 frames per second, but the display tends to be more choppy compared to the G65G. And if you actually go back to the playback, you can see that the quality is now actually dropped to 480p. So when it comes to real life performance, this is something shocking because the G65G is maintaining at 1080p 60 frames per second, but the Nothing Phone 1 drops at 480. I'm not sure whether this is some YouTube issue or this is an issue with the software on the Nothing Phone 1. So I'm just going to exit this for now, and then I'm going to play back this. Hopefully we could even the playback parameters, so I can show you the comparison between the 4K HDR on both these devices. So let's go to this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to limit this to 1080p 60 frames HDR. So there we go, and go all the way, pause it, go all the way to the back. So both are at 1080p 60 frames per second, but there's HDR on the Nothing Phone 1, no HDR on the G60. So a couple of observations. Once you go to 1080p, the resolution is about the same, but you'll notice that the colors on the G60 tends to be more vibrant, and in terms of the dynamic range, they are comparable to my eyes. I would say that definitely the colors are more vibrant on the G60, but the display is warmer on the Nothing Phone 1. I'm just going to let this video play for a while so that you can experience yourself. So you can see how the shades here is more punchier than the one on the Nothing Phone 1. So I'm going to slide this. Now what I'm going to do now is to show you the audio output on both these devices. So I'm going to play the audio from the G60 first. So the G60 speaker is a mono speaker. It is loud, it's adequate, has the depth, but it is no match to the dual speaker setup on the Nothing Phone 1. So I'm just going to pause this in a while. The speaker here, so you can see, I'm going to launch it and going to play this. Let's bring it to somewhere here. Okay, let's go. So you can see that the speaker on the Nothing Phone 1 is definitely a better
in the sense of the overall experience that you get. That's not to say the speaker on the G60 is bad, it's just that there is no way a dual speaker setup could lose to a mono speaker setup. Both are good, but the Nothing Phone 1 is definitely better. So that brings us to the battery performance on both this device. In general, the battery life on the G60 is better than that on the Nothing Phone 1. Both the devices have the same battery capacity at 4500 mAh. The Nothing Phone 1 has a faster charging speed at 33 watts compared to 20 watts on the G60. And of course, the Nothing Phone 1 also supports wireless and reverse wireless charging, which is really nice at this price point, and it is absent on the G60. So that brings us to the camera, which is the more interesting part here. A dual camera setup on the Nothing Phone 1 compared to a triple camera setup on the G60. Both these cameras are at 50 megapixel resolution. The primary one has optical image stabilization, the ultra wide does not have. On the G60 we got a primary 50 megapixel with no OIS, a 5 megapixel ultra wide and a 2 megapixel depth. Now in my previous comparison, the G60 5G has a very good daylight performance, and it's going to be interesting to see how they perform together here. On the front you've got a 60 megapixel camera on the Nothing Phone 1 and an 8 megapixel on the G60 5G, but I do have to say that the AI portrait mode on the Nokia G60 5G is definitely a game changer compared to previous camera algorithm for the portrait mode on previous Nokia devices. So I'm going to end this video by showing you samples of images taken by both these devices. I do hope you enjoyed this video. A comparison with the Nothing Phone 1 and the Nokia X30 5G is coming up very soon, so I do hope to see you in my next video.